簡単にMiLIのご紹介改めてさせていただくとですね、2013年に発足をしております。で、もともと世界基準のリーダーシップ、それからコーチングプログラムを日本に届けていくという意気込みを持って行っています。で、今日も僕らの方からご紹介させていただきますけども、我々の特徴としては、最新の脳科学の理論やリサーチに基づいて、組織開発、リーダーシップ開発、それから人材開発のプログラムを提供すると、いうことを我々MiLIの特徴としてこれまで行ってきたかなと思っております。活動実績としてはですね、述べですけども、マインドフルネスをお伝えさせていただいた方々1万人以上、それから、具体的なその組織ですね、企業様中心ですけども、観光庁を含めて200社以上、200組織以上、届けをさせていただきました。それから、関わった書籍については20冊近くですね、なっております。それから、この後、チャーリー・メンタンさんにご登場いただきますけども、メンさんがもともと作られたプログラム、Search Inside Your Selfについては、25回ですね、日本の中で行わせていただきました。パブリックプログラム、それからその企業の中でも導入を進めています。早速ですけども、この後、チャーリー・メンタンさんをお迎えしたいと思っております。この書籍、これもちょっと英語版ですけども、ご覧いただいた方いらっしゃいますでしょうか。この本が2012年に、世界に発信されて、世界にですね、マインドフルネスが広まっていった。その考え方をもとに我々も日本で活動させていただいていると思います。はい。では、その Search Inside Your Self の、プログラム、開発者であり、シリと呼んでいます。Search Inside Your Self リーダーシップインスティテュートの、ファウンダーですね。それから、世界的な平和、活動も、行っている組織の、ファウンダーでもあられます。チャーリー・メンタンさんに登場いただきたいと思います。
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. If you don't mind, shall we begin with my favorite meditation? It's very short, only 3 breaths. If you don't like it, 3 breaths is over. So this is how it's going to work. For the first breath, I'd like you to gather your attention. And the technical term is samadhi. So the word samadhi means collecting. So this is collecting your attention on the breath. And then in the second breath, we bring awareness to the whole body. And this is a practice of insight, looking at the body, looking at experience. And then our third breath, we calm down what is called the bodily formation. And the technical term is kaya sankhara, which means everything that is formed by the body, which means tension, stress. We just calm it down. Sounds good? Okay, so let's do that. Okay, first breath, collecting attention. Second breath, awareness of whole body. And third breath, calming down body formations. And thank you for your attention. See, this meditation is so short, but it's very powerful. I don't know if you notice when you do these 3 breaths, you feel at the same time more relaxed and more energized. Which sounds like opposites, but you have both benefits at once. And this also is very powerful because there are 3 very important things in meditation, and you do all 3 at once. Right? One is concentration or samadhi. The other is insight, wisdom, right? Which is observing phenomena. And the third one is serenity. And these 3 qualities all 3 are very important in meditation. And you get all 3 in one practice, in 3 breaths. So shall we do that again? Okay, one more time. First breath, collecting attention. Second breath, aware of whole body. And third breath, calming the body formations. Thank you. So for those of you who work in a leadership position, you're a manager or you're a CEO and you're practicing mindful leadership, this practice is very useful. And it's very useful, especially between meetings. Right? So you have one meeting and then the next meeting. And if you're a good leader, what you want to do is to give your best self to every person who comes to meet you. But it's very tiring. There's so many meetings, so many people want your attention. How do you do that? How do you give your best self to everybody? And this is one of the key practices. So when one meeting's over, before the next person comes in, you have 10 seconds. This 10 seconds, you do this 3 breaths practice. Then when the next person comes in, you can give your best self and they'll be impressed. They say, wow, you're always such a good leader. And at home, you can also do this because it's just very good for your mental and physical health. Sounds good? Okay. So I want to go straight into my speech. I want to start by telling you a story. And this story is about a very skillful young leader. A few years ago, US soldiers were stationed in Iraq, and the situation was very volatile, very dangerous. Things could blow up at any time. And a small group of American soldiers were patrolling the streets in a major city in Iraq. And then something happened. And the American troops found themselves surrounded by an angry crowd of people coming towards them. So imagine yourself in that situation, right? A small group of heavily armed foreign troops surrounded by a large crowd of angry but unarmed civilians. And then imagine you are the commander of the American soldiers. What do you do? And it feels like a no-win situation, right? Whatever decisions you make, a lot of people could die. And you only have a few seconds to make that decision. What do you do? Fortunately, the young commander, the American commander, had a very high emotional intelligence. He looked at the situation and he ordered his men. He said, all of you point your guns down and smile. And they all did that. They point the guns down and they're all smiling. And because they're smiling, the crowd stopped. And then after a while, the crowd just dispersed. And no blood was shed that day, thanks to the wisdom of one young commander. And I find that amazing. And the reason I tell you this story, my friends, is to illustrate the power of mindful leadership. When you train in mindful leadership, my friends, when you train to become a mindful leader, there are at least 3 qualities that you cultivate. And the first quality is the ability to think calmly under enormous stress. The second ability is the ability to regulate your emotional response. And the third is empathy and compassion. And these are the qualities that enabled our young commander to turn a no-win situation into a happy situation. And that, my friends, is mindful leadership. It is that powerful. And in this instance, it is literally the difference between life and death. So when my dear friend Kimiko invited me to give this talk, she asked me this question, right? Is Search Inside Yourself still relevant 13 years after founding? Search Inside Yourself, as you know, is the mindfulness class that my team developed in Google in 2007, which has been very helpful in developing mindful leadership. So Kimiko asked me the question, and my first answer is, of course, it's just as relevant. And the reason is because Search Inside Yourself is based on timeless ancient wisdom concerning the causes of mental and emotional suffering and the solutions to mental and emotional suffering. And in one ancient scripture, our ancestors gave us the list of what causes sickness, old age, death, not getting what you want, and being forced to accept what you don't want. And my friends, this list of the causes of suffering hasn't changed in 2000 years. Certainly hasn't changed in 13 years. And since the causes of suffering hasn't changed, therefore the solutions also haven't changed. And Search Inside Yourself is based on those teachings. And that is why it is timeless. And I think that when I'm a very old man, 50 years from now, some of you may ask me the same question, I'll give you the same answer. However, I thought about it a little bit. And then when I think about it, I realized I was wrong. Search Inside Yourself is not as relevant today as 13 years ago. It is, in fact, even more relevant. Why? As you can see from the story of a young commander, mindful leadership is most powerful in the most difficult circumstances. It is a little bit like developing physical strength. I mean, usually it's good to be strong, right? I mean, you can like open jars, right? You can carry things. So it's good to be strong. However, when your life is in danger or the life of your loved ones are in danger, then that's when your physical strength really shows up. In the same way, many of you here, my friends, have practiced mindful leadership. So you know how useful it is in normal circumstances. However, it is when things become very difficult that the power of mindful leadership really shows up. Difficult situations require extraordinary leaders. And when things are difficult, that is when we most need leaders who can think calmly under fire, who can regulate very challenging emotions, and who can do all that with empathy and compassion for everyone. In other words, my friend, in a global pandemic, with economies, ecosystems, and people under stress and stressed to breaking point, with the rise of fascism and evil worldwide. For those of you who practice mindful leadership, the world needs you more than ever. You, my friends, are the ones the world needs. It is your time to shine. There's another way I can frame everything I just said. And I can do that in 3 words, or 3 English words. May not be true when you translate to Japanese. And the 3 words are, mind is chief. The biggest problems in the world are created by the human mind. And the power to solve our problems arises from the human mind. mindfulness is a training that enables us to master the mind. Therefore, mindful leadership enables the solution to the world's problems. And my friends, you are it. So if you only remember one thing today from my talk, remember this. Remember that mind is chief. If you remember two things from my talk today, then remember that as mindful leaders, you are the ones that we have been waiting for. And that leads us to the next question, which is, what do we do? And I like to suggest two things every mindful leader can do in this very challenging time. And the first thing is to deepen our practice. One thing I found is that the greater the challenge in life, the greater the depth of mindfulness required to overcome it. And the comparison is like, juggling balls. Right? If you need to juggle 3 balls, you need a certain skill level. But if you need to juggle 4 balls, then you need to have a higher skill level. Right? So the increased challenges around you will require a higher level of mental skillfulness. And so, my friends, my first suggestion to all of you is to do your sitting practice for at least 45 minutes a day to upskill to the next level. So think of it like playing a video game, like just upskill, next level. The next thing I like to suggest for you to do, my friends, is to not be shy to take lead. If something needs to be done, don't be shy to take action. If a leader is needed, don't be shy to be the leader. Part of it is giving back to the world, of course. I mean, we are all very lucky people because we had the fortune to learn mindfulness. So part of taking action is simply to pay back to the world for all the good that He has given to us. Also, part of it is creating a better world for ourselves and our children and our children's children. However, another part of it is that taking action in the world is part of the practice. For example, if you're learning boxing, right? First, you need to develop strength in the gym. That's the first thing you need. And then you need to learn the basic techniques for attack and for defense, right? So you do all that. And then what? And then you have to go into the boxing ring to actually box with people. That is the real practice of a boxer. Why? Because there are certain boxing skills that cannot be developed without actually boxing with people. Right? So if you don't box with people, you never become a real boxer. In the same way, in practicing mindful leadership, obviously, meditation practices are important. However, there are certain mindfulness skills that can only be developed in the real world. And therefore, taking action in the real world is part of the practice. For example, the skills that are involved in dealing with triggers, in maintaining concentration and joy in the middle of activity, resilience, overcoming despair, inspiring and motivating people, and even firing people with compassion. All those skills you cannot gain just from sitting. Right? So the practice of mindful leadership is the practice of mindfulness. So my friends, that's it. Remember, mind is chief. The more you master the mind, the greater a leader you can be. And then if you remember one other thing after that, remember that the world needs mindful leaders more than ever. And that is you. And therefore, continue to deepen your practice. Don't be shy to take action in the world because taking action is part of the practice. And that, my friends, thank you for your attention. And thank you for leading all of us with mindfulness.
はい、メンさん、ありがとうございました。まあ、シンプルだけども本当に深い話で、ちょっとこう、グッときてます。はい。ここから20分ほどですね、皆さんからの Q&A のお質問いただける時間にもしていきたいと思います。で、はい、スラメース45分というのは分割でも良いでしょうかということを、いただきましたので、こちらについて、メンさんからいただきましょうか。
Yes, so I give you the short answer and give you the long answer. The short answer is you can split it in as many pieces as you want. So you can like do 5 minutes, 9 times. And for me, actually, I like to do very short practices. 1 breath, 3 breaths kind of thing. So very short practices are very useful also. So that's the short answer. The slightly longer answer is that there are actually 2 types of practices. There is mindfulness practice and there's concentration practice. So in mindfulness means observing phenomena, specifically observing the body and what you get from the 5 senses. And when it comes to mindfulness, it's cumulative. Every moment that you do mindfulness practice, it accumulates, it adds more to your practice. The second type of practice is concentration. And the thing about concentration is that for most people, it takes a while for the mind to collect and concentrate. So for some people, it might take, let's say it takes 10 minutes. And then that means that if your sitting is shorter than 10 minutes, then you don't get benefit for concentration. And if you're only sitting for 15 minutes, you only get 5 minutes of benefit. So because of this, I like, for myself, I like to vary so that I have 2 long sits and a lot of short micro practices. So I get the best of both. And by the way, I do 2 hours a day. So I'm not just saying to you, I also lead by example.
ありがとうございます。はい。じゃあ、私の方で、たくさん質問いただきましてありがとうございます。ちょっとこれも私も聞いてみたいなと思うのがですね、メンさんが瞑想を実践したことによって効果を感じられた具体的なエピソードがあれば教えてください。
A lot of examples. There are examples that are like momentary because at the moment, and there are examples that took a longer time to show up. And I can give you one example for each. The example where momentary is always involving public speaking. So I was speaking at the United Nations. It's a big forum, right? It was very scary, and it was TED, right? So 1 million people are going to watch this. And then I got nervous. Halfway during my talk, my legs started shaking. And so I need to collect my mindfulness and not fall off stage. So there is an example of at the moment, right? Practice has to come. A longer example. There's a story I told about in the Search Inside Yourself book. So some of you are familiar with this story. And the story was I have a friend who worked in this company, and I was fairly senior in the company. And then this friend who I work with in the customer client relationship, he has a new boss, and his new boss fired him. And so I got really angry. Right? So, and I was senior in the company. So you can imagine the situation where I go into the guy's office, bash open his door and scold him and start a fight. But I was like, okay, let's practice mindfulness. And then I think about, wait, why is that person doing that? Why did he fire my friend? There must be a good reason. I mean, this guy he's not random. He doesn't just come in and just fire people. And so the first thing I do is understand his reason. And not just understand it, like learn it with some humility, and then help him succeed in the way that also helped my friend. And so I sent him an email, introduced myself. I told him what I want. I told him the situation, and I say, I want to learn from you, the situation. And then we sat down together with tea, and then the whole situation resolved. And then now we're friends. So a situation where we see this a lot in real life, where people fight and they become enemies. And because you practice mindfulness, it becomes a situation where everything works well and you're friends at the end of it.
はい、ありがとうございます。天聖さん、これはっていう天聖さんからのピックアップ質問ありますか？
こういう質問です。マインドフルネスに消極的な人、疑う人、自分には向かない、関係ないなどと思っている人にマインドフルネスを進めるコツはありますかという質問です。
The general principle is to always help the other person. So I tell you how most people phrase it, and I tell you how I think about it. The way people phrase it is to start at the learner's level. So don't start at your level, start at his level. Right? So the way I put it is find out what that person needs. Help that person solve his or her need, and then through that introduce mindfulness practice. And it's for that reason that when I started this search inside yourself in Google, it was about success. Right? It wasn't about mental health or stress reduction. It was about success. And the reason is because everybody in Google wanted to be successful. They wanted to have emotional intelligence. They wanted to be in control of situations, but they didn't know how to do that. And so I talked to them. I say, this is how you do it through mindfulness. Then they pick up mindfulness because they want to solve those problems. So that will be the general solution. Figure out what they want, help them in the way that they want to be helped, and then introduce mindfulness.
はい、ありがとうございます。多分これは皆さんも感じられていることじゃないかなと思うんですけども、実践というところで近い存在ほど難しいという印象です。特に子供にはできても妻や夫に向けてできないことが多いです。それを妨げてしまっているのは何でしょう？近しい存在への甘えでしょうか？っていうご質問です。
So there are two parts to that question. Right? The first part is somebody you're close to. The second part is a child. Right? And the reason is, the first part is practicing mindfulness with a person close to you. The second part specifically about a child. So the reason it is hard is because we're attached to outcome. Right? So let's say it's somebody you barely know, right? The guy from the next office. If he practices or he doesn't practice, doesn't bother me. So I teach him and he does it. Yeah, I'm happy. We don't do it, whatever. However, if it's somebody close to me, then I was like, why are you not doing it? What's wrong with you? Right? So there's attachment. And it is because of this attachment to outcome that causes suffering. That's the first part. And then for our children, it's even worse. Because in addition to attachment to outcome, we are also attached. We want them to grow up to be happy and well and successful. And worse than that, as parents, we also invest ourselves in the success of our children. Right? So if they're successful, I feel like I'm successful. And so therefore, the attachment is even worse. And that's why it's even more difficult. So what's the solution? So the solution, first part of the solution is first be aware of the attachment. Awareness is half the solution. Second part is even after you're aware of attachment, if it still bothers you, then learn to figure out what bothers you, how it bothers you, and learn not to be attached to the outcome. And then specifically for kids, I have a few specific suggestions. The general specific suggestion is the only way to teach your children anything is by two things. By example. Actually, there's only one thing, by example. By example, and don't tell them to do it. If you tell them, they fight back. But if you do it by example a lot, then they'll do it. And the example, for me, the model is this person called John Kabat-Zinn. So a lot of you from the mindfulness world knows John Kabat-Zinn. And what you don't know is his son, Will Kabat-Zinn. He's now grown up. He's in his 30s. He's a very good teacher. And I told both of them, I said, Will is a better teacher than John. And then when Will was growing up, John didn't bother to teach him. And John, all he does, he himself sit. And then Will come sit with him for 10 seconds and then run away. But because Will sees John do it all the time, when he grows up, eventually he himself picked it up. And now he's an even better teacher than his father. So that's it. Don't be attached to the outcome and just love them unconditionally and just show example.
はい、ありがとうございます。では続けて天聖さんいかがでしょ
う。分断の話なんですけれども、まさに分断はそれぞれの人のマインドが作り出しているのだと思います。分断の解決には自分のマインドからと思いますが、他者のマインドに働きかける必要もあると思います。どのように働きかければよいのでしょうかというご質問です。
In what context?
そこまでは言及されてないんですけども、多分これは僕の想像ですけど、今の社会的な背景とかそういったことも、あるのかなというふうに、想像しながら今拝見してました。
I can tell you a story if you don't mind. So a few years ago, Google was making a documentary on me. It was never released, but they made a documentary. And so as part of the documentary, I did not know this until the end, but the documentary team interviewed people around the world who say that something I did changed their lives. And so at the end of the process, then they came to me and they said, they've been doing this. I said, okay, thanks for telling me. And then they say, this one, this particular, you have to see this one. This one is special. So they show it to me. And it is a young man from Egypt. His name is Omar. And Omar grew up in Egypt hating Jewish people. And then after reading my book, and he was 17 years old at the time, after reading Search Inside Yourself, he changed his mind. He decided that Jewish people have a right to live. It's a huge change. And so I was very touched, right? And so I asked him, like, is there anything specific in Search Inside Yourself that caused you to have the switch? And he said, it's the just like me practice. So remember the just like me practice. There are three parts. Like you think of the other person, and you think this person is a human being just like me. This person wants to be happy just like me. This person wants to be free from suffering just like me. So he did this exercise for Jewish person, and then he realized that person is also a human being, just like me. And that changed his mind. And in practice, I think it's actually very hard. But I think that's a very good start. And then I think beyond that is, so first do that, right? Just like me. But beyond that, I think it's awareness of suffering. awareness of how much people suffer. And then when you're aware of people suffering, you might be aware that there's a part of you who wants to help. Not necessarily you want to take action, but there's a part who wants them not to suffer. And if you see that, then grow it. And that thing is called compassion. And I have a suspicion that this process, again, is very hard. But this process, I think, is how we get to the breaking down of separation.
はい、ありがとうございます。たくさん本当に貴重なご意見いただいているので、全てお聞きしたいんですけども、もう時間が限られていますので、最後一つだけ今日のメンさんの最後のメッセージとして、やっぱり皆さんが、リーダーシップを発揮してくださいという強いメッセージがあったと思います。で、質問はですね、リーダーシップはテイクアクションしていく中で得られるもの、動いていかなければならないという言葉に感銘を受けました。それこそ日本に必要だなと思いました。テイクアクションする上での恐怖、不安、躊躇をうまく乗り越えるための Tips についてアドバイスをください。
I can tell you my fear, and I suspect is fairly universal. And that fear is the fear of suffering. So if I take action, if I stand out, people might see me, people might scold me. They might see me different. They might think of me as an enemy. They might think I'm pretending, and so on. So and all that is suffering on my part, and I'm afraid of my suffering. And then what else happen? In addition to that, I might fail. And if I fail, my career might be ruined. People look down on me. And that is suffering. And so I realized that all my fear in my life has one thing in common, which is the fear of suffering. Therefore, the less I fear suffering, the less fear I have in life, the braver I become. So for me, the breakthrough was the first time I did the compassion meditation practice. Again, I think I wrote it in Search Inside Yourself. It's Tonglen, the one where you breathe in disgusting suffering and breathe out light. That affected me a lot. The first time I did it, because I realized that I was scared to breathe in suffering. And then, but after I did that, when I'm no longer scared, my confidence level in myself went up permanently. In 10 minutes, I have a permanent increase in confidence. And then I realized this is the problem, my problem. My problem is fear of suffering. So again, I know it's very hard to overcome this. So again, the solution, number one, is awareness. Be aware of where the problem lies in. And the problem lies in fear of suffering. And then the second part is, again, more awareness. Awareness of, like, in those situations. So for example, when you actually put yourself in the situation, all the fear, people scolding you, and you go, So bring attention to the situation and how I'm feeling in my body and the suffering and my fear of suffering, right? And then, so by looking at all these things, then you slowly become to overcome it. And then your confidence increase. And again, I know this is very hard. So my last advice is, and this applies to myself, and it's probably works for you, is to be slightly beyond your comfort zone. Because if you're too far from the comfort zone, you might be paralyzed. You can't do anything. If you're within your comfort zone, you'll never grow. But you're just slightly beyond comfort zone, then you grow. Then everything we just talked about, the awareness and so on, you can practice. And the analogy is doing weights. Like if it's too heavy, your muscle doesn't grow. If it's too light, your muscle doesn't grow. But if it's just heavy enough that you struggle, but you can still do it, then you grow. That is the zone slightly beyond the comfort zone.
メンさん、ありがとうございます。本当に具体的な僕たちが咀嚼しやすい、そして実践しやすいアドバイスを、ありがとうございます。 大変残念ながら時間が来てしまいました。今日のメンさんの力強いメッセージですね。皆さんがリーダーとしてアクションをしてくださいというところ、もうすでにこの今のオーディエンスの方々アクションされている方も多数いらっしゃいますし、これからアクションしようと背中を押された方もたくさんいらっしゃるんじゃないかなと思います。はい。本日はチャディ・メンタンさんに基調講演をいただきました。メンさん、ありがとうございました。
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for having me. Thanks. I hope everything I said was useful to you. And I hope you didn't mind this hair because we had a lockdown in California. So I haven't had a haircut since March. But thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.